we're allowed to go inside. Oh my god. I'll be honest, I've never been to Syrup Contemporary before this. We went on a pretty quiet afternoon. It was just Ruby and I and one other person in the space. Syrup is quite light, kind of airy, and almost too quiet, except for the sound of construction happening somewhere in the background at all times, and planes flying overhead every few minutes. Walking in, it wasn't immediately clear where one exhibition ended and the other began, because there's actually two solo shows happening here at once. Ali Diffenbaum's What Is Measured Cannot Be Undone and Jake Starr's Pig Earth. And they speak to each other so closely, materially and conceptually, that they almost collapse into each other in this one environment. But at the same time, there's a really important distinction to make here. Only Starr's work is for sale.
Rolling up on Lime bikes, we almost missed it. Syrup's facade is one of the many fairly nondescript warehouses that litter Marrickville and was then converted into a gallery in 2024. Syrup is actually a commercial gallery, and their exhibitions tend to run for a month each and range from solo shows to group shows. The layout is essentially one long rectangle, concrete floors and white walls with exposed metal beams holding up the roof. Upon entry, we then immediately pass through Diffenbaum's exhibition to get to Starr's show on the other end of the space. Pig Earth, which is the show we will be reviewing today, is a solo show by Jake Starr and curated by Sarah Hibbs. It is on from the 11th of April until the 2nd of May.
It's Starr's work that holds the most weight in the gallery. Their work titled Pig Earth is this house-like structure. It's got 4 walls, a pointed roof, and a floor all made from this bare, unsealed wooden planks. The wood ranges from light to dark tones and has some parts tinged with this heavy blue remains of paint. The entryway to the structure is covered by a heavy black woolen curtain, which you pull aside as you walk in, and you're then greeted by a 4K video on the opposite wall. This space feels unstable, and I don't think this feeling's accidental. This is something both artist Jake Starr and the curator Sarah Hibbs are actively working with. Starr is a research-based artist working across sculpture, moving image, text. They draw on both post-structuralism and anthropocentric hegemony, accelerationism and conspiracy theories.
And these are phrases which we've quoted from their exhibition text for Pig Earth. We had been looking at the essay that Starr and Hibbs prepared for this show, and we thought that it was really revealing of their conceptual concerns and supported the context of Pig Earth very well. This term, anthropocentric, for example, refers to the belief that humans are at the center of existence, essentially claiming that we are intellectually above all other animals. So Starr here is criticizing this view. They are claiming that the anthropocentric worldviews manifest themselves through consumerism and capitalism. Yet most significantly, however, what's expressed in their show is how anthropocentric views are revealed through the treatment of animals.
Their work is concerned with the liminal. They live in these in-between zones of human and non-human, from failed to domesticated, and at the same time, it's not entirely possible to escape our anthropocentric perspectives because they're so ingrained in us. Yet Starr really pointedly links to specific material choices with corresponding subject matter. They draw frequently on imagery of the abattoir, which I feel is really the definition of a human-centered worldview. Sarah Hibbs, as the curator, brings in this framework that's a bit different, but complements the work. Her research is primarily in the economics of the art world, things like labor, value, and systems of exchange. I think this is a large reason as to why I find this show so interesting, especially when you find it in a commercial gallery space. The way these two practices resonate together brings something really unique.
We had looked at these photos online before and we were really struggling to figure out how they had been printed, and as someone who's very into printmaking, I can now say that yes, this is half tone on like an abattoir canvas is what the room sheet mentions. And we're looking at a very blurry black and white photograph of a close-up of an animal's eye being sort of propped open by a thumb and a forefinger.
I'd say it's quite ambiguous because I read it as it being squished. So the eyes being squished closed.
Interesting.
So that's how I'm reading it. So me and Ruby have different readings of this.
It looks very stained, like even very faded blood stains or oil or grease. And again, with the halftone dots, we can really see that the materiality of the canvas. So this third image is a close-up of, I believe, a fox or maybe a young puppy, but with pointed ears. It very much looks to be a fox. The fox is we can basically just see their face, and they are just lying on the ground potentially, and then we also see a like sort of jutting out from the bottom left of the foreground like a quill or a glass pen. The strange luxury of pity, and this is the work that we were looking at in the previous clip, is one of 3 prints in that show, each almost about a metre squared. It depicts a fuzzy black and white image of a silver fox printed on abattoir canvas. So in hindsight, the use of abattoir canvas and Starr's choice of imagery opens up what I believe is a very successful conversation between subject matter and material practice in order to support their conceptual concerns. The halftone prints allow the viewer to see the murky stains on the actual canvas. In combination with the fuzzy black and white images, these stains assume a ghost-like presence in the images. The stains could be blood, oil, we don't really know, but they provide a really interesting contrast to the animal life depicted in each of those prints. It gives rise to a dialogue between a part and the whole, the body and the remains.
The fox in the image is referencing a lineage of fox kits that was shaped by a long-running experiment that began in the 50s, where the most friendly kits were sourced from fur farm populations in the USSR to test whether their behavior could be selectively bred. This selection was repeated and repeated, eventuating in foxes that were not just more tolerant of humans, but their physicality had shifted. Their ears softened, their faces were more juvenile, and their temperament was no longer independent from their physical body. This connects closely with the writings of Barbara Creed, titled Stray: Human-Animal Ethics in the Anthropocene. Stray animals occupy this liminal position in human systems. They can either be domesticated or wild. This opens up conversations around anthropocenic hegemony, that the value of these animals comes from their use and their proximity to humans.
Oh, okay, so what you mean is that sort of in terms of the fox image that we were just looking at, the fox isn't presented as something separate from human influence, but more that its body physically points back to the systems, i.e. us, that shape it, and then I guess in a way also oppress it. So essentially our interference is ever present.
Yes, and for example, when considering the domestication of foxes, the breeding started to affect physical characteristics. This is why I think the work of Donna Haraway is most useful to us. She frames humans and animals as if they are already entangled. The fox is never separate from human systems, it's produced through them. While Creed pushes in a very different direction, because for her, the liminal space that these animals occupy, like strays, are unsettling because they don't fit neatly into human categories. Haraway is more concerned with how humans and animals are interconnected. There's no clean separation or connection that needs exposing.
Although, I feel like there is still a drastic distinction between the two here. In terms of Starr's material exploration and choice of subject matter, they do manage to momentarily decenter or criticize an anthropocentric worldview that would commonly be assumed by the viewer, whether they are conscious of it or not. Yet I also do agree that the lines are blurry. Even if human presence is not in the work outright, the remnant of human presence and interference remains. Although, framing Starr's work in terms of Creed's writing on this, Starr closely references the abattoir, which connotes animals domesticated for consumption. Creed points out that stray animals like foxes, cats, or dogs are oppressed by us humans, which is something that I definitely agree with. They also label an anthropogenic stray as almost another form of waste produced by humans. I believe that animals domesticated for human consumption are framed in this way through Starr's work. This is because cattle are not only also oppressed, but they are solely functional. They have no agency, no freedom, and if they can't suit their purpose, they are discarded or labelled as unworthy by humans.
In Creed's work, she considers the complications of what is natural and what is constructed. This is referenced within the physical space of the show. For example, we know that structure in the middle was constructed. It was made to look derelict and then put in the exhibition space. It's made to look like it's in a state of decay that belongs somewhere deep, deep in a forest, beyond the perimeters of this space. This is where I think Haraway's point aligns well with this argument. She frames humans and animals as already entangled and co-produced. So from this perspective, the fox isn't something outside human systems at all. It's produced, shaped, and exists through them. Starr's work, in my opinion, is closer to Haraway's ideas, but it still doesn't let go of this hierarchy.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the hierarchy is still there. And especially as the prints only portray animals, it still feels as if we are looking in on what's happening, rather than seeing it from an animal's perspective, which I get is something that's really hard to do, if possible at all. By drawing on the imagery and materials of an abattoir, it immediately connotes that animals have been fully absorbed into systems of human consumption. Creed focuses on animals like foxes, dogs, cats, especially in stray form, and that are treated as excess or waste within human systems. Bringing this back to Starr, I think they extend this logic further into animals used for consumption, like cattle, where their bodies are structured entirely around utility. There is no real separation between life and function. They exist purely within systems of production.
I mentioned Sarah Hibbs before, the curator. She's researched into labour, and I have this feeling that the gallery is also what's being examined. The work is an object circulating within a commercial space, so how far is this critique of power actually going? When we consider Michel Foucault, power is everywhere, and it's not something you can step outside of. You're always operating within it, and maybe the fact that the work is in this space might actually be the point. The constructed wooden structure in the middle of the space relates to these theories of power. Starr facilitates movement and controls how one moves about the space. In addition, the video work is only accessible within that structure. So once inside, we are able to gain an understanding of that work, but must also stay there if we want to hear and see more.
But then, thinking more broadly of power and dynamics, I think it is also very important to consider how commercial galleries might also pose a conflict of interest of sorts. Power dynamics are present both within the exhibition and outside of it, as well as in the gallery setting. Within the exhibition, power dynamics between human and non-human animals are being criticized, yet there is also a power dynamic present in the commercial gallery setting and in the work it shows, as well as a dynamic between the once industrial space.
And I think this idea of space and power becomes really clear when you look at the work. And it said, "You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust," which is Handcarved Wood 2026. This is a series of 3 works, which consists of 3 near identical carved wooden apples. They read as simple, they're near decorative objects, and they're really beautiful. All 3 apple carvings are sold separately, and they're priced accordingly on the room sheet. Starr's work is clearly embodying the same for the profit of humans system that's being critiqued in their work. Because these apples are so beautifully done, it makes you question why there's 3 of them at all. They are beautiful objects and they don't really require this repetition. Why apples, and what's with this theme of repetition here that we don't see anywhere else in the show? The only reason, and the most obvious reason I can see, that this is a commercial gallery. They work great as a series, but I also think maybe I'm being cynical because it is a commercial gallery. These are clearly can be sold separately kind of thing, and there's no kind of asterisk that these should be bought together. They kind of are standalone pieces in a way, even though they are a series. Very interesting stuff.
I see how the apple cores fit into the idea of human consumption and interference, and I guess maybe the repetition is meant to refer to the scale of human consumption. That they have been bit into and discarded really defines the theme of human power. But at the same time, on a visual level I agree, it doesn't occur anywhere else.
And the work plays into that anthropocentric perspective. To even think about humans having power over non-human animals is already to center human authority. But there's a meta layer here where power is already in place, and the critique is still operating inside of that structure, especially when thinking about systems of consumption and how animals are turned into profit.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jerry Saltz, who is an art writer and critic that I really like, he's had a lot to say about the commercial gallery scene over the years. And although he's looking at a more international scale, he does discuss how consumption impacts the art practices and changes relationships between buyers and gallery owners. He criticised how art fairs and markets sacrifice support and meaning for impact and that shock factor as a way of marketing art to rich buyers. Even more so in the modern day, they're sort of catering towards this idea of niche in order to sell work. Even more so, he criticized the oversaturation of the art market, that it becomes flooded with unoriginal work that caters to trends and tastes of rich buyers, which I feel is really a pretty big statement to make, to be honest. There has also been some time between when he wrote those claims and now, so things definitely could have changed. I will say that I do agree with him partially. I think that when art is in a commercial setting, there is definitely a dynamic present that you are sort of made aware of. Saltz frames this dynamic as a relationship defined mostly by consumption. We especially have entered that space with the intention to review a work. So in a way, I guess we are consuming it as well and reshaping it in our output. I really think that when looking at it broadly, it is a relationship in which power, critique, and the commercial gallery space become very entangled. Saltz would again argue that money comes into play in a pretty major way, as these works are intended for sale. I also believe that because of that, the gallery space and curation of the show has to assume certain roles and aesthetics to fit into cultural preconceptions that one would have about a commercial art gallery. Overall, I think that there are relationships of power and expectation present, not just in the gallery, but in most commercial galleries that dictate how we experience and consume art.
Exactly, and this is where I think Michel Foucault becomes useful again. Power isn't external and you can't step outside of it. It circulates through these institutions and systems. And that's why I think this exhibition ultimately leaves you in an unstable position, where critique, circulation, and consumption are all entangled together. We left the exhibition not feeling any more settled than we had when we arrived. There are a lot of questions being posed that the viewer cannot possibly resolve after one viewing. Pig Earth has definitely managed to instill a more critical awareness of humans and animal dynamics and relationships. It asks us about animal agency, human control, and how we consume.
No, I definitely agree. We made our way back to make this review with a heightened sense of the weight of the world. The cruelty and guilt of a human-centered worldview isn't something that you can fully escape, but it is definitely something you can forget. Even in a show that aims to de-center an anthropocentric perspective, we are simply reminded more of how it permeates every aspect of our life. Ultimately, I take it as a sign of a successful show. We exited with guilty consciousnesses and a lot to think about.